All right, let's talk about locks. You probably don't think about them much, but they're not just chunks of metal. They're these incredible little marvels of engineering, and they're the result of a centuries-long secret arms race between the people who design them and the people who try to break them.
So, have you ever really stopped to think about what makes one lock better than another? I mean, what's the real difference between a high security lock and that old padlock on your garden shed? Is it just more metal? A weirder looking key? Well, the answer is way more fascinating than you think, and we're about to find out why.
So let's dive right in. To understand this whole arms race, we first have to get our heads around one single, absolutely fundamental concept. It's kind of this secret flaw that makes picking a lock even possible in the first place. That's right. The entire art of lockpicking, this whole hobby and profession, it only exists because of tiny, microscopic imperfections. We're talking about manufacturing defects so small you could never see them, but they're there, even in the most expensive, high-tech locks on the market.
This is the secret sauce. It's called the binding defect. Think about it. If a lock was perfectly, flawlessly machined, and you tried to turn it, all the internal pins would get stuck at the exact same time, making it impossible to pick. But, perfection is impossible. So because of these tiny misalignments, only one pin, the one that's most out of line, will get stuck or bind first, and that's our way in.
And what's the goal? We're trying to get those pins to the shear line. The easiest way to think of it is as the finish line. It's the physical gap between the part of a lock that turns, the plug, and the outer part that stays still. A key's only job is to lift all the pins so that the little gap between them lines up perfectly with the shear line. When everything's cleared, boom, the lock opens. Okay, so now that we've got those core ideas down, let's rewind the clock. The very first locks were like the opening moves in this huge chess match of security. They were simple, yeah, but they set the stage for everything that came after. Early on, there were two main players. Warded locks, which were basically just an obstacle course inside. The problem? You could make a simple skeleton key that just bypassed the whole course. Whoops. Then you had lever locks, which were a big step up. The key had to lift a bunch of little plates to a very specific height. But even those could be beaten by a clever technique that basically lets you figure out the key shape you need. And then everything changed. The pin-tumbler lock was invented, and it was so good, so easy to mass produce, that it completely took over. It's still the most common type of lock in the world. In fact, this is almost certainly the kind of lock that's on your front door right now. So how does this thing work? Well, you've got the outer hull, and inside that, the plug you want to turn. What's stopping it? These little stacks of pins. At the top, you have springs pushing down on driver pins. Those push down on key pins. It's the driver pins that are physically blocking that shear line we talked about. The correct key just lifts everything up, so the gap between the two types of pins lines up perfectly with the shear line, clearing the way for the plug to turn. So how do you pick it? You use that beautiful little imperfection, the binding defect. You apply a little bit of turning force, and just one pin will bind up. Then you use a pick to gently lift that single pin until you feel a tiny little click. That's the sound of the driver pin clearing the shear line. The plug will turn just a hair, trapping that driver pin up in the hull. That's called setting a pin. And then you just do it again and again for the rest of them. And this quote just captures the central irony perfectly. If these locks were made with flawless precision, picking them would be impossible. The very microscopic flaws that make them affordable to produce are the exact same flaws that let someone open them without a key. So as soon as everyone figured out how to pick a standard pin tumbler, the arms race kicked into high gear. Lockmakers had to get really clever. They started designing locks not just to keep people out, but to specifically trick and defeat the person trying to pick them. Their first counterattack was basically psychological warfare, in the form of security pins. Instead of nice, simple cylinders, these pins are designed to lie to you. Imagine you're picking a lock, and suddenly the plug gives a deep turn. You think you've got it, but nope, that's just a spool pin giving you false feedback. Or even worse, a serrated pin with a bunch of little grooves. Each one gives a tiny click, making it almost impossible to know which click is the real one. It's just mean. The next evolution was a huge leap in strategy. The thinking went, if you can't trust the pins anymore, why not add a second, totally different locking mechanism? Enter the sidebar. Now a picker has to get all the pins to the right height, and they have to rotate them to the perfect angle to make that sidebar retract. It's like having to solve a Rubik's Cube after you've already picked a normal lock. From there, the next move was to change the battlefield itself. This is where dimple locks come in. Instead of a key with cuts on the edge, these use a flat key with little holes, or dimples, drilled into the side.
Now, this sounds simple, but it's a game changer. It lets you put pins in all sorts of weird, complex arrangements that are incredibly hard for a standard pick to even get to. And then, some designers just threw the whole rulebook out the window. They asked, what if a lock had no pins and no springs at all? And what you get is a disc detainer lock. Inside, it's a series of slotted discs that all have to be rotated just right to create a channel. For a picker who's spent years learning the feel of pins, this is a totally different universe. It requires a whole new set of tools and a completely different mindset. So, as you can see, the history of the lock isn't a straight line. It's this constant cycle of innovation and adaptation. Every single time a new, unpickable lock is designed, you can bet someone, somewhere, is already figuring out how to open it, and that just pushes the designers to go back to the drawing board. So the big takeaway here is that not all locks are created equal, not even close. This chart is a great summary. Your basic pin tumbler, it's a decent challenge, but you add those tricky security pins and the difficulty jumps way up. Then you move to a whole different system, like a dimple lock or a disc detainer, and suddenly you're in a whole new league of security. Of course, today the fight isn't just mechanical anymore. It's gone digital. We've got smart locks on our doors that open with our phones, biometrics that use our fingerprints, but this hasn't ended the race. It's just opened up a brand new front. Now it's not just about lockpicks versus pins, it's about hackers versus code. Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. For centuries, we've been trying to build the perfect, truly unpickable lock, and for centuries, we've failed. So as our technology gets more and more complex, what do you think the next step in this ancient arms race is going to look like? If you enjoyed digging into the incredible engineering hiding inside something you use every single day, and you want to see more explainers just like this one, well, you're in the right place. Make sure you subscribe to The Explainer. We do deep dives like this all the time into the technology and history that secretly shape our world. Thanks for watching.